Hello everyone, my name is Jason Ergang. Welcome back to Disobedient Minds. This week we're talking about characters, the third element of story, and perhaps the most important of the five elements. After all, we read stories and watch narratives on television to see what happens to our favorite characters. Characters can be broken down into three aspects or categories, which can be applied to every character that appears in a story. A character can be round or flat, static or dynamic, and a protagonist or an antagonist. When we study characters through these categories, we begin to understand the very reliable, obvious formula which all characters in all narratives follow. As we study, we'll be applying our notes to several characters from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, without further ado, our lecture. Put simply, protagonists are who or what the story is about. In previous grades, you may have been asked to determine the difference between a hero and a villain. But for our purposes, the main character of a story isn't necessarily a hero. At this point in your studies, you'll begin to encounter stories in which the main character might not be a good guy. Some stories, in fact, are entirely from the villain's point of view, such as in the novel Grendel. For our purposes, the protagonist is defined as the main or most important character in a story. For Avatar: The Last Airbender, our protagonist is Aang, the cunning, clever monk. Though he is surrounded by a cast of strong supporting characters, the story of Avatar follows Aang's journey as he works to become a fully realized Avatar so that he can bring peace to the world. The character who opposes or fights the protagonist is called the antagonist. The antagonist always represents a problem for the protagonist. Whether it is physical, emotional, or social opposition, the antagonist wants the protagonist to fail for some reason. Just as the protagonist is not always a hero, the antagonist is not always a villain, especially if our protagonist is a troublemaker or an outlaw. The antagonist might be someone who represents the law and attempts to bring the protagonist to justice. In Season 1 of Avatar, the antagonist role is filled by the angry, banished Prince Zuko, who relentlessly hunts Aang down in an attempt to prove himself to his abusive father. Zuko represents the kind of antagonist who is not necessarily a bad guy. He simply wants to go home, and has been told the only way to do so is to capture Aang. If a character is neither a protagonist or an antagonist, they are a supporting character. A supporting character is different than a protagonist or an antagonist because the story is not about them, but they still serve an important role. King Bumi represents a supporting character. He is a strong ally for Aang, and is heroic like Aang, but the story is not about King Bumi, and he only appears in the story to help or hinder the main characters. A dynamic character is a character who undergoes a powerful or dramatic change during the course of the story. Their beliefs about life or the world are altered by their journey, and their personality changes in important ways. Now, when we say a character changes, it is critical to understand that something important about them changes. Their beliefs, their actions, their thoughts, or their emotions. It's not simply a change of clothes or a haircut. Uncle Iroh represents a dynamic character, one whose beliefs and behaviors change over the course of the story. As we uncover his past, we learn that he was just as warlike and cruel as his brother Ozai, until Iroh lost his son in the siege of Ba Sing Se. This leads Iroh to change. He abandons his claim to the throne and gives up on leading troops, eventually turning on his own brother and the Fire Nation, because he has come to believe that the war is wrong. As opposed to a dynamic character, a static character is a character that does not undergo any kind of important change over the course of a story. They are effectively the same at the end of the story as they were at the beginning of the story. Princess Azula best represents a static character because her thoughts, feelings, and personality do not change a great deal from the time she is introduced until the end of the story. She begins as a dangerous schemer who doesn't care for others, and ends as a dangerous schemer who doesn't care for others, with only some minor changes to her personality. A round character is a character whose personality seems realistic. Even though they might be a cartoon character or a movie superhero, their thoughts, emotions, and feelings seem similar to a real person. A round character has conflicting thoughts and motivations, and, like a real person, their behavior doesn't always make logical sense. Katara is a round character because she has realistic emotions and conflicting motives. She loves her brother, but is also infuriated by him. She cares for Aang, but is afraid to tell him. And when the rest of her friends choose to trust Zuko's reformation, Katara continues to mistrust the prince. The best illustration of her depth is when she is reunited with her father. Even though she understands his decision to go to war, she is still angry at being left behind. A flat character, as opposed to a round character, is a character that does not have much emotional depth or believability. A flat character only has 2 or 3 parts to their personality. They do not seem like real people because there just isn't that much to them. An example of a flat character is Che, the deserter who brings Aang into Zhang Zhang's camp after helping the Avatar escape from Fire Nation guards. Che has only a handful of personality traits. He is awkward and somewhat goofy. And that's pretty much it. The only thing we really know about Che is that he respects Zhang Zhang a great deal. Other than that, Che doesn't have much personality. Understanding the types of characters is fundamental to narrative analysis. A character's motives, combined with the story's conflict, might be the most important of the 5 elements of story. A quick note before we go. Remember that each character has 3 traits. A character is a protagonist or an antagonist, dynamic or static, and round or flat. For example, Sokka and Katara's father, Hakoda, is a round character because he has emotional depth like a real person, a static character because he doesn't change much from the time we meet him until the end of the show, and is a supporting character because though he supports Aang, he is not a main character. This has been Disobedient Minds, proudly brought to you from Western International High School in Detroit, Michigan.